Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Dancing Sober podcast. Thank you so much to Espacio 1839 for allowing us to do the podcast here inside the studio, or I mean their shop, of course, but I like to call it the studio. Don't forget to visit Espacio1839.com or come and visit Espacio at 1839 East 1st Street in Boyle Heights. Visit them in person. This is listener supported, so if you can do anything to help the podcast out, our Venmo is at Dancing Sober. That's at DANCNG SOBR, Dancing Sober, just like we spell the podcast. Without further ado, this week's episode is magnificent. Give it up for Martha Gonzalez. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Dancing Sober podcast. And lo and behold, who do we have in the studio today? Legends of the legends. In the studio today is Martha Gonzalez.
Hey.
Do you add a Flores to that, or is it just...
No.
I'm just wondering.
I am married to a Flores,
Yeah.
but no, I don't know. It just never
cool.
really...
Yeah. I just wondered at this moment.
Yeah.
Because I've never seen it.
Yeah.
Well, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and
I really love your podcast, and I'm glad that you do what you do and interviewing so many different people in our community. And so thank you for doing this.
It's part of what I call like my new learning process too. So it's like I get to sit down with people like yourself and get to actually have these conversations that we never get to have because, for example, when I saw you Saturday, we blinked at each other like, "Hi, how are you?" and moved on because we were both in like the madness of the moment.
Right.
That was happening at that event. And yeah, we don't always get to like sit down and talk. So
Never.
Some of my favorite things to do since like 2014 is have these kind of conversations, is just sit down with people. So,
Yeah.
And I know how busy you are, and we will get into that in a minute. So I appreciate your time. Let's start, like we always do here, on like, where you from? And where'd you grow up?
Where you from?
And tell us some stories about, your young days.
Yeah. So,
I like to say, tell us about you before you became you.
Right. Yeah. So I was born and raised, I'm daughter of immigrants from Guadalajara, Jalisco, born and raised here in East Los Angeles, Boyle Heights. I was born in Boyle Heights in Santa Marta Hospital, which is now the Hilda Solis Center. Mm-hmm. But Santa Marta Hospital is where I was born. I wasn't named after the hospital. That's Santa Marta with a T-A, and I'm Marta with a T-H. I'm named after my mom. I'm the second oldest, but oldest daughter of 4 siblings. And, we...
Did you go to like Belvedere and all that? Or
I went to Lorena Street School because we lived at Lorena and Beswick for a long time. Well, I have to say, we lived in Jefferson, which is mid-city, right, on Jefferson. And then we moved to La Puente for a little bit, a tiny bit. But most of my formation was in Boyle Heights. I went to Lorena Street School Elementary. And then I went to Stevenson Junior High for like a week. And then I was bussed out to Bancroft Junior High School.
Wow, where's that?
That's in Hollywood. So this is a time when they started bussing kids out, and it was a magnet, performing arts magnet. So, one of those magnet schools. And so
that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I was part of a gifted magnet, but I didn't go to another school. I stayed in my...
Bosco.
I stayed at Belvedere. No,
Belvedere.
At Belvedere, yeah.
Wow.
That was in middle school. In high school, I was just a mess. But yeah. That's awesome. I didn't know that, you had that kind of... like schooling. That's awesome.
Yeah. And then in middle school, when I was going to Bancroft, then at the beginning of going there, I heard about Los Angeles County High School for the Arts. And then I went to LA County High School. I auditioned in theater. I was a theater major.
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
So I went there, and it was really...
Let's go back a little bit because that's like already like your whole like youth or teenage and adolescence and all that in like 1 or 2 sentences. But let's get in there and let's find out a little bit about like, because you come from family that has so many talented souls. Like really, like, I mean, you guys, since I've seen you perform, it's always like just beautiful talent. I don't even know how to put it sometimes in words.
Thank you.
You guys compliment each other on stage, and I know that I'm wondering, how was it like growing up with all these kids, and
Yeah.
was there like talent shows at home? Was there like
Yeah.
that kind of
All that.
silliness? Yeah.
Yeah, you know, my dad, it starts with my dad. And my dad used to want to be like a singer, you know? And I think that he had kids, and then that dream went away, you know? But before he really, unfortunately though, my dad was always dreamed of like being like this famous Mexican crooner or something. Like he loved Javier Solis, Jorge Negrete. Like these are all big voices. Exactly, Pedro Infante, folks like that. And he always wanted to do that. But when he met my mom and they got pregnant with my brother, they met here in La Alejandria, which is like an immigrant hub. They used to have dances in the big ballrooms in this hotel called the Alexandria. People say, I call it La Alejandria, but
no way.
But
I've never heard these stories of that. I've heard a lot of stories about that place,
yeah,
but not
that's because you haven't read my book. You gotta read my book.
Let's get into it. Oh my God, I didn't even know.
Yeah.
Okay, go on.
No, so anyhow, so they met there, and then, you know, they got pregnant and they got married in Guadalajara. They came back and they had all the rest of us. But I think that really derailed my dad's, you know, dreams for being a singer. You know, he couldn't picture his life in music and then also still having a family. You know, he had to provide and all that stuff. He felt like he had to provide. And of course, yes, right? Be responsible. But I think that it didn't mean that he couldn't continue music somehow. But I think that his ability to see beyond capitalist frameworks of like, oh, only music on stage or only music in this certain way, you know, was really shut down for him, you know. But there was always music in the house. So my dad was always playing records. He was always making us learn songs. And unfortunately, I think with all the depression and things like that, I think my dad had mental problems as well. Like he was emotionally, he had a lot of trauma. From his upbringing and stuff, and he started drinking, and my dad pretty much drank himself to death. But he left us by the time he was too abusive, and it was too crazy in the home by the time I was 11 years old. But before then, he had dragged my brother through, like basically vicariously living through him, when he realized that my brother Gabriel, who's actually a very prominent singer here in Los Angeles, especially through a band called La Verdad, which is a salsa band, right? My brother's early beginnings is really being a ranchera singer, everything that my dad wanted to be, you know, and so he basically put him in all of these contests. He quickly rose to some kind of recognition and did like, I don't know how many films by the time he was 11 years old. And mostly in the Mexican cinema scene. So he did films like with Los Humildes, La Sonora Santanera, Lucha Villa, David Reynosa. These are all old school, like
This is
Mexican.
why I love these conversations. Like, I would have never known.
Yeah.
Even though I know him as like a great performer.
Oh, yeah.
I would have never known these things if we don't have these conversations.
He has an amazing history. You know, the beginning of my book, I'm really writing about him. It's about him and all of the ways in what he had to go through. And there are so many more stories. I only tell the ones that I remember from my perspective, right? But he went through a lot, and my brother's been through, you know, and again, all of this is, most of the music that we learned is oral tradition, right? So like by ear, everything is by ear. So my brother's a musician, what they call líricos, right? Like basically they just learn by ear. And he's an amazing harmonizer. He can rhythm, I mean, you know, all of these things. And so anyhow, once my dad left, because shit was so bad, once he left, I was 11 years old. My brother was older. It was really important for him to have a male figure. I'm sure this was very traumatic for him. But at least we had peace in the house. And then my brother, but we were all continue to sing in the house. Like singing was just a part of how we connected with each other. My mom wouldn't let us leave the house at all. She'd be like, no, aquí, you know, she tried not to work as long as she could. She was on welfare, but moved money around because it's not like we were rich or anything, right? And she just made sure that she could stay with us as long as she could. And then at some point she got a cosmetology license, and she started working an hourly job as somebody who washed shampoo in Beverly Hills. And during that time, we would still stay home. She'd make sure of it, and we'd basically do plays, or we'd sing, or, you know, in some ways myself my brother and my sister after me, which is Claudia. She's also a singer, an amazing, wonderful singer. Would started doing things together as a group. We got in and out of groups, and at some point I was like, "F this with music. I don't want to have anything to do with this anymore."
Claudia Cava?
Yeah, okay. Claudia. Yeah, she has she goes by Cava. You're right.
Yes.
She goes by Cava, but her name is Claudia, and but her band is amazing. She used to have a band very well known in East LA and all around. It was called Domingo Siete.
Yes.
She used to go with that she started with Gabriel Tenorio, and they were partners at some point. They had Mia. Mia's also a singer. She's an actress. But my brother Gabriel had a daughter, and her name is Annie. She was the first grandchild, and so now she's a very prominent actress, moving up, crazy, like amazing work. So it's interesting, you know, that music has always been a part of our cultural upbringing, our understanding. It was always because it's always been fun as hell, but it's also been really something that we use to sort of like it's cathartic for us, you know, because we like whether it's pain, happiness, or anger, music and dance is a way to get it out.
Some people might use sports to like sweat it out, you know, and some people might use video games to like just get your frustrations. But yeah, music can do so much, of course. I mean, I don't have to tell you this, but yeah, I could see that. Like, you definitely, the intensity that you guys put into the music that you did is equivalent to like the intensity that an athlete would put into their game. Yeah, because it's not like you were just jamming out with 2 songs. I could imagine you guys had really strong sessions.
Absolutely, yeah. And all vocals too, because we don't play, we never played. Now I play instruments, some of us play, but at the time, like, we were just all vocal, oral tradition, because we didn't have money for lessons. It was all by ear.
So during this time, you guys were all kids still. You guys were in school, and how were you guys, like, were you now like doing little bands while you were in high school, or was that until like college? Or
so in elementary school, once my dad left, like, we were broke, and we had an amazing teacher in Lorena Street School. Her name was Helen Stringos, and it's really interesting because this teacher also influenced other artists, right, that are very prominent right now. Shout
out to the teachers. We always do that,
right? When we yes. Oh my God, Helen like Stringos was also. Do you know who Kajin Fujita is?
Yes.
Okay, Kajin and I went to the same Lorena Street School. We were in 5th and 6th grade together.
Wow.
Same teacher, and so we Kanshu, his brother as well. So myself, my sister, Kajin, and Kanshu we were in the same gifted class, 5th and 6th grade class as those 2 guys, and we graduated at the same time. They went, Kajin went to Stevenson, and we went to that other school. So that's the last time, But isn't that crazy? But same teacher.
Yeah.
Anyhow, during that time, an agent came to see one of our performances, and the performance was singing and dancing, and this guy was like, "You guys should audition for this show that, you know, they're doing a new TV show and they need Latino kids." And so we ended up, we auditioned, and my sister and I got both the parts as, you know, do you remember, well, you know the comedian Paul Rodriguez?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so he had a TV show in the 80s called AKA Pablo.
Oh, AKA Pablo. ¿Qué pasa was the other one? Yeah. AKA Pablo.
AKA Pablo. That's his first show, and we were the kids. We were his nieces and nephews.
No way,
my sister and I. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, I'm a kid. I'm a teenager in the 80s, so you know, I was born in the 70s, 71. So yeah.
Yeah. Same here. We're about the same.
Yeah,
age.
I did get to see these things on TV.
Yeah.
When we had TV and all the different.
And so that was amazing for us.
That's crazy, dude.
My
God.
That's the first time we got into the Hollywood scene of, like, you know. Now my niece, of course, is killing it out there, but it wasn't what it was, right? Yeah. What it used to be is not what it is today, and that was really interesting. It was like, what? We're getting paid to do this? This is amazing, and we were able to keep our family.
I think that's amazing, because some of that, like, we can't get in the Hollywood thing. It has to be generational. Like, it has to be like, you know, like one generation will open doors or even introduce people to it. Even if you don't do it, you at least introduce your nephews and nieces to it so they could start like looking at it maybe, even if you could never do it.
Or it seems familiar or something.
Yeah, and they're not like, oh, that's such a distant thing. Just bring them around it, show it. And I love that, like, as these generations like proceed, it becomes exponentially more accessible.
Yes,
And,
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I love that. Yeah, and it's so evident with Annie now and you know, the movie that's coming out. So
Annie and her work, and then Gabriel has other sons younger than Annie, and both of them are also. One is a filmmaker, and the other one is also an actor. He's about to be in the Blue Beetle. Actually, he has a part in the Blue Beetle that's coming up, and then the youngest also is a singer and a actress as well, but mostly a singer. And and my son is a musician, you know, and so it's in the family, all in the family.
All in the family. That's awesome. Yeah. So at what point did you start getting more involved, like in the, let's call it the East LA music scene? Yeah.
So I was going to UCLA in the ethnomusicology department, and I was brought in there by my cousin, who was already a major there.
Was this like fresh out of high school, you went to UCLA?
No, I actually went to, I tried to enlist in the Navy because I didn't know what the hell to do with myself. And I knew I had to try to help provide for my family and help my mom somehow. And I was like, what the fuck? And people were getting accepted to colleges. And I was like, where do I apply? And it was like, you apply almost half a year before. But nobody told me, you know. I wasn't one of those like kids that any of the teachers cared enough about to say like, don't forget to apply to whatever, or take the SATs or whatever the hell. I was totally left out of it. LACSA is a very Eurocentric, to this day, it's a very Eurocentric school. And anyhow, but nobody told me until by the time I, was graduating, I was like, I'm just going to enlist in the Navy. I went to the recruiter's office. I was too young to sign myself up by barely.
I'm just thinking of like the contrast of like music theater, Navy.
Yeah, I know. Let's go. And necesidad, la pura necesidad. But I was just trying to be as practical as possible. I've kind of always been like that, which is what led me to academia to begin with, and quite honestly. And so I went. They didn't take me. They said, come back when you're 18. Or we'll call you up as soon as the time is coming. And so then I went to junior college because I had a boyfriend whose mother used to teach there. He was era gringo, right? And my first boyfriend, I was totally in love, and he was like, you should go to college. I was like, I'm just gonna get a job, and he's like, no, you need to go to school. And he was gonna go to up north to school, and so he brought me an actual catalog, because there used to be paper catalog, and told me to just sign up and send it in the back, and they'll send me back information. They did, and I signed up for the worst classes. I had to
whatever was available.
6 a.m. remedial English, because I didn't pass any of the courses, and so, but it was the best thing that could have happened to me because I learned how to learn at Pasadena City College.
Wow.
And it's an amazing school. To this day, I've had the best learning experiences in that junior college. And a couple later I transferred to UCLA.
I want to take just a second to touch on those words that you said right there, was learned how to learn. Yeah. Because a lot of times, people in our community, we don't learn how to learn, and we might think we're stupid. Yes. We're not stupid. There's just a process to like learning how to get the information to stick with you, right? And sometimes because we didn't pay attention when we were younger, we forget the process that, first you have to...
Or because the information wasn't relevant to us, right? We're getting taught all this shit that really, a mí que me importa, you know what I mean? How is it relevant to me in my life, right? And it's the banking system, right? What Frieri calls, the banking system. The schooling is like, they give you something and you have to regurgitate it, and they give you something and they want you to learn how they learn, right? And or what they think is important. Yeah. And in many ways, being a learner is being a critical thinker, right? Like asking yourself different questions, and I realize this because for a number of reasons right now that I've been in education for so long, but my son went to private school the entire because although I had a wonderful teacher, I really feel like I got lucky. And then I became a substitute teacher many years later when I got my credential and all of these things. And the system that was up, I knew would tie my hands, and I didn't want my son to go through that. So I put him in private school. And to see the way, if he couldn't learn a certain kind of math in one way, it was the teacher's challenge to try to think of a new way to get him to learn. He wasn't set. They didn't say, "Oh, es menso, he's stupid, he can't learn this," or he has a learning disability. They'd say like, "Okay, well, it seems like I'm going to try this method to see if it So Montessori is like that. So is other forms, experiential learning, for example. Like where everything is connected, and
that's awesome.
It's amazing. Yeah. And so now when I see my son and how he figures things out, and with the way he talks about it out loud, I'm like, God, this little fucker, he's really smart.
I love it.
Y no es que sea más inteligente de lo que uno era, más bien it's like he was taught to feel confident about I don't know it, let me try it this way, let me try it he never doubts how smart he is.
That's good.
Unlike the way we were raised sometimes, ay, qué menso.
Tira eso or whatever.
Exactly. No seas menso, qué menso eres, sometimes in our families, but sometimes in schools, I had the worst teachers later, and or third, fourth. I remember first, second, third, fourth, bad teachers, tired teachers.
Oh my God, yeah.
Under-resourced teachers, It's not always their fault, but it's also...
it's not always the teacher's fault, but it was just a bad system.
Yeah.
So let's go back to now the music. I'm trying to figure out, because this whole time, and I mean, it's really, as you speak, it's even more evident how much your life is both. And how your music carries, your intelligence as well as, your...
I love it.
Your process, or the things that I see that you're studying and that, you've gotten your degrees and also are informed by the music and your community. Yeah. So this is all one thing that you have built here. And so I want to maybe a little more about how that happened or I don't know. Yeah.
So it was through education and through PCC transferring to UCLA into the ethnomusicology department that I thought, it's music, but it's a different kind of thinking about music in another way. Music as kind of anthropology, kind of as a way of being in the world, and understanding a culture in through music. And I thought wow, that's exactly what I would love to learn. And so I auditioned, I got in, I was in the ethno program. The first year I went was really daunting. I don't think I found my community, and I dropped out.
Because also it's UCLA now.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And even you feel amazing at PCC, UCLA still has.
Yeah, and honestly they dropped the ball. I felt very isolated. I felt like I took a women's studies course because I had taken one at PCC, which totally changed my world. But then when I got to that one, it was very white feminism, and what I now understand as white feminism. I could not relate. Again, and it was just I think I got a D, and I thought, okay, that's the end of my career, and I left. Yeah. And then, but during that time, towards the end of my time at UCLA, I met Quetzal Flores, who needed a singer for a band. And even while I was at UCLA, I used to do a lot of background singing for different bands in the city. I used to sing background for a band called Toledo and another one called the Rhythm Tribe, and so. When somebody called on me to say, you want to sing, they need a singer for the band Quetzal. And I had seen them a year before at Troy Cafe. And I remember being wow, what an amazing band. I remember the lyrics. They had a song called Agua de la Manguera. And I loved it. I thought it was so cool. And I thought I could sing background for that. But when I met him, he's like, no, I need a singer. My singer quit, and I need an actual singer. And I was like, I don't sing the way she does. I'm I'm a different kind of singer. And he's like, I don't care. I want you to do what you do. And I was like, okay. But that's when I met Quetzal, and, we connected on music right away. I think I always had a sense of social justice in me, but not knowing quite how to connect it to other things, I mean, I had lived through so much with my dad and, surviving my dad and surviving, just fucking being broke, watching my mom struggle, immigrant children, children of immigrants, Boyle Heights, all that, you learn so much about the world. So by the time I met Quetzal, and he kind of had this long Chicano upbringing, you know, he knew he was Chicano. He knew what he knew about himself. He grew up, you know, as a red diaper baby, as they say, you know. And so for me...
I never heard that before.
Really?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
A red diaper baby.
He did, yeah. His parents are longtime community organizers and legendary, you know, Roberto Flores and Consuelo Valdez. And so, yeah, so he comes with all this information, and I'm sort of like, I'm Mexican, you know. And then at some point, I had a major life situation that happened where I was like, I felt the duality really clear and present, and I was like, I'm Chicana, you know. I actually came into a Chicana consciousness, unlike him, he's always known that he's Chicano, or my son, for example.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah, I had a similar experience to you, and that happened to me at East LA College.
Really?
Because I've told the story before, but I'm gonna make it short. When I was like in 4th grade, one of my teachers he couldn't say my name Rafael, so he changed my name to Ralph in all my transcripts. So I was known as Ralph throughout, from 4th grade through high school. And when I finally went to East LA College, I saw a thing that said change your name on your transcripts. So I changed it back to Rafael, and that's when people started calling me Rafa. But at ELAC is when I started to take Chicano studies for the first time. I knew nothing about any of this. I grew up in East LA like as a little tagger kid, you know, like hanging on buses and writing on walls and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so I knew nothing about any of this.
Shut up.
Until I was like in my mid-20s or like 23, you know, and that's when I like started to get into all this, and like 25, So I had a similar experience where I just had no idea what it was, but once I learned it, just the way you said it, like I awoke an awakening or a consciousness. I was like, wow, this is exactly like where I stand, you know?
Yes.
Yeah, so.
Totally. Same, about the same age, too.
Yeah, about the same age, about the same time, We grew up different, just like in the hood, doing hood stuff, kid stuff.
I mean, we knew we were Mexican. I'm not quite sure if that's your background.
Yeah. We were always Mexicano. Or I would say I'm Mexican-American, you know, hyphenated.
Exactly.
But it wasn't until that I started to use the word Chicano,
Yeah.
Now I say I'm Chicano, but I can also identify as Latinx or Latine or whatever. Yeah. So,
totally,
So now you're in this band, and you know, I don't know how many people. I mean, there's some people that don't like to that wouldn't want to have like a Disney contract, but when I hear your first album and like those first songs, it's like I'm listening to Encanto, you know.
Are you serious?
And I'm thinking of like the years, like you did this in 2000. It's beautiful. I mean, it's good. I listen to a lot of Disney because my daughter and her little sister hang out a lot.
I actually like that soundtrack.
Yeah, it's a great soundtrack.
Yeah, I've heard a couple of songs.
So, like, in going back and listening to stuff as I'm getting ready for this, I was like, oh my God, like, listen to this. It's amazing. Yeah,
Thank you. It's almost 30 years. It's crazy.
Yeah. And it's like, I just love it that, like, you did that such a long time ago. And it's like, it's the sound. It's almost the exact same sound. Yeah. Anyways, it's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. So,
well, that expression has been around. Who we are in those ways has been around, you know, like, it's who we are. And that's how we expressed ourselves at the time, and it's changed over time. But we continue to sort of have the same kind of musical exploration with the same sort of, like, the firm stance and ambiguity. You know?
There's a beauty in how you take us on a musical journey, and you sing, and you take us, like, you soar somewhere, but then you sit back and go, now listen to me. I'm going to talk to you for a second. And I'm going to tell you a few words. And when you, like, come back to your, like, speaking voice in some cases, like, it draws you into, like, okay, I'm listening now. And, you have powerful words,
Thank you. Thank you.
How did all that start? And, I mean, you already told us how you met Quetzal and all that.
Yeah.
And how was all that experience of, like, you know, being now, like, a very popular band in those days? And for people who were not around in the late 90s, 2000.
They're like, Quetzal who?
The East LA music scene was a scene. I mean.
It was. Do you think the scenes are the way they are now? No, right?
I don't know.
Maybe we're old and we're not in it.
Yeah, so it's difficult for me to say because I don't go to all the gigs anymore. They still have a lot of people. They still, it's still like happening. But there was something back then. I think at that same time, a lot of people were coming into like the Chicano consciousness, and like a lot of people were like, okay, this is like, this is where we can all like gather. Yeah. Maybe that was it, or it was like the second coming of like Chicanoism. Yeah. Because the 70s were probably the first.
Yeah. I feel like we had one of Quetzal's mottos when they first started it, with his whole thing was like a new experience in Chicano music. That's what he would always say. This is a new experience in Chicano music. And that's not negating what came before us, of course, and honoring our ancestors in music in all the different facets, but it's also a way of like, okay, now we're continuing to express ourselves and look at what these people, this youth in this time, but yeah, that time was really exciting. It was always a gig, 2-3 gigs, sometimes 4 or 5 gigs in one weekend. And we were being hired to do, we didn't make a lot of money, but we did there was always an urgency, this event, countering this proposition, or we're again, for
the year of like, or the season of like nonprofit and
exactly, exactly. Yeah, 187, so or where Rigoberta Menchu's new book, or the Bus Riders Union, or Mumia. Exactly. It was always something, and we were supporting and collaborating with other organizations. They would pull on us all the time because of our lyrical content, because of our kind of how we would wear our, how we would. How adamant we were about the things we were saying, and then the sound, right? How we would bring all these different sounds together, and we would sing in English and Spanish and Spanglish, and and it was just like, it was just a lot of fun. And then we had a very tight-knit group of other musicians like Aslan Underground, the Blues Experiment, Quinto Sol, Olin, Lisa Flores, all of these artists and mentors like Alice Bag and Las Tres, and other bands that we were just like in awe of and collaborating with, and always saw each other at events, and and that, or we would support each other. Like, oh, you want to record an album, you need to raise money. All right, well, we'll play for you for free. And next time we have a fundraiser, you come and play for us. And that was the agreement. And we did that. We were a tight-knit group of artists that supported each other, which also included filmmakers, Smoking Mirrors, those guys, right? Artists, Omar Ramirez, Jose Ramirez, Lily Flor, so many different moments and in different spaces as well.
This connects us to like another one of the big, I want to call it a theme right now. Not a theme, but or maybe things that you stand for is like community is like such a big thing for you, and like, and community, and how, let me just throw that at you and just say community.
Yeah. I mean, we don't exist in a vacuum. I'm not, there's a term that I really connected with in academia. It's like relationality, right? We are the relationships that we keep. And that is exactly who we are as a band, where our responsibility and our accountability to community is really important. We are held responsible by them. We not only reflect them in our lyrics and the things that we say, but always in the dignity in that we try to walk in, in our music and in the choices we make in business or in other things that are a part of. We want to always reflect that, So, and for that reason, like, it was very common if you were going to tour or whatever, that you would take a sponsorship, right? We were offered sponsorships from like, Camel cigarettes to like, there's a beer. It's a green bottle. I forget the name of the beer. Anyway.
A long time ago.
Heineken, yeah, Heineken. Good beer. I drink. I mean, but because our community suffers so much from alcohol and drug abuse and my dad died of alcoholism. That's one of the ways Quetzal, I told him, I was like, well, they could sponsor us. It's like, it's a lot of money. It's $30,000. We won't have to sleep in the van. We could use this money. And he's like, Marta, if we take this money now, we're gonna finish it like this, and it's never gonna, we can't do that. It's never gonna end. It's never gonna end like that. And we didn't take money.
Wow, these are the scenes that they write into movies that you're like, that doesn't happen.
It did to us.
It does.
But in many ways, people were like, damn, like you guys, we didn't play that game. And so I think that in many ways, when it comes to industry-wise, I feel like it hurt our career, we didn't play that.
It's a tough one. That's a tough one.
It is. It is.
Well, and then, I mean, having a band member who is a red diaper baby, you're going to have to follow certain guidelines that... He was always the moral compass and still is, because I think that if you don't keep questioning certain things, you're always, I definitely have fallen into from time to time. It's like, well, this just makes sense. And so how else are we going to blah, blah, blah? I'm more of that, like I said, more, what did I say? Not sensible, but just sort of like pragmatic, sort of like I make these kinds of decisions that are like, this makes sense. I'm willing to do this and I'm going to do, And he's sort of like, fuck that. No, he's more like, fuck that. Nope. And I was like, oh man, all right, okay. But we find each other sometimes in the middle, And sometimes he'll be like, you're a sellout. And I was like, fuck you. It's a tough one. I mean, I've had to make some choices sometimes, and I have taken the money but I really needed it, but I still live like a life where I try to not do corporate things a lot, but it's so tough. No,
and it's no judgment on anybody else. I'm just saying, like these are the moments that we have experienced, and over time, that we've made decisions over. Okay, I didn't take that money, but I went to academia, and there's nothing bigger than the knowledge engine of capitalism, right? Than academia, right? So I bought into this whole other side.
I didn't think of that side of the academia.
Yeah, so
speaking of academia, then after, I mean, it's so we're compacting your entire life into a tiny hour, but speaking of academia, after touring with the band and doing all the things that you did in those years, you at one point after having a child, you decided to go back to school.
Yeah, we toured for about 8 years. I was 9 months pregnant, the last gig I did with my son at that time, before I gave birth. And then we got right back into touring when he was 2 months old. Yeah, there's nothing like motherhood that makes you feel the urgency of like stability and, his life over yours. I had a son, and he was just like the most, I waited to be a parent a long time. I was 32 years old when I had him, and I remember bringing him home and just looking at him like, wow, like I hope I'd never kill this little thing. Like, what if I do something wrong? I can't believe that somebody entrusted me with this little life, but I remember taking it to this day, I take it real seriously. I feel like I've left a lot of things behind because I wanted to give him everything that he needed. I wanted to be in his face. Nobody ever took care of him. He never had a babysitter.
Wow.
Like, you know what I mean? Like we were really broke at some point, and I went to substitute teach, like I said, and then Quetzal would watch him while I would go off and do this, because this was the fastest way to make money. And then I would come back, I would pump during lunch, because I nursed him for 2.5 years, and then I'd come back and and then he would be dressed and there would be food, and Quetzal would we just trekked it like that and try to do gigs as long as we could. And at some point I told him, I was like, we need to think of something else. It was too hard. We were paying, believe it or not, in Highland Park for a 1-bedroom apartment, $565 a month.
Oh my God.
With a driveway and a garage. It was incredible. Yes. people went. Actually, the first anti-mall happened there in my driveway, and it was the best. It was Highland Park hadn't changed yet, you know, and off Avenue 60, and it was the best place. We lived there for about almost 8 years for the same amount of money. If I had been making more money, I could have saved all kinds of money to buy a house.
Before going back to what we were talking about there, about going back to school, I just like that you touched upon this, how you were already like a successful band, you know, somebody that had a big fan base, a group that had years of showing your strengths and touring. But it's still difficult to like make ends meet. Like, how does somebody, I don't know, like how does like a band make money in those situations, or do you sell music still?
So I really don't think you make money now either.
Yeah, it's tough.
I think because it's very difficult. The record industry has changed a lot, but at the time, you know, even before live streaming, right? The streaming, you know, you made your money off of merchandise, right? And your gigs. Because it's not like, especially at our level, you weren't like selling millions and millions of records, you know? And even if you did, you probably took a big upfront money that the record company always finds a way of gouging the artist and saying, whether it's paying for paper that they're sending letters out of, or dinners, or whatever it is, the studio time, the rehearsal time, the marketing, like all that is getting charged back to the artist, you know? So you really have to know your business, you know, to know that as a band or as in the industry, you really aren't going to make a whole lot of money unless you clear a certain range. And even then, you're going to owe the record company a lot of money, right? But now it's even worse, because now the record companies have come up with something called the 360-degree deals, where they actually they have a right, or they stipulate in their contracts that they now also get a percentage of your gigs, a percentage of your merchandise, and anything that has your namesake. So think about that. Like, that's like, then how the fuck are bands making money? You know, it's nearly impossible. And it's, again, the capitalist like machine saying like, okay, we're not making enough money, we want to make even more. And honestly, the industry is a scam. And once you realize that, and not like get romanticized this idea that like, oh, look at how awesome this band looks and how they're doing, and really like they're barely making it, you know, barely making. I mean, we had won the Grammy, and some of us couldn't pay our rent, you know. Even that same year, a couple months later, you know, it was like, you don't win money, you know. It's just like the facade of success, you know.
I like what Eduardo Arena said, you know, because me, Chicano Batman is killing it. Right?
Killing it.
He said, we're a very good T-shirt sales company. That's where they make the bulk of their money. T-shirt sales, so it's crazy.
And gigs, probably.
And gigs,
I don't know what kind of a deal they have, but I'm sure that the record companies like, you know,
Well, let's get back to the PhD thing, and because I want to hear some stories about that and how you pushed through. And
you know, so when my son was a certain age, he was about 3 years old, almost 3, I decided that I had been, throughout the years, we've been interviewed by different academics because of the content in our lyrics, because of what we do, or why I stomp on a wooden box, this tarima thing, you know, as we were involved in that kind of stuff, and doing interviews, sometimes the academics would send us back the book chapter, or whatever they were writing, and say, like, just look over some things that I wrote and let me know if I was right or if I was wrong, if something was misspelled, let me know. And I remember reading through some of that stuff and being like, oh, they're writing about us in this way. And I remember thinking, I can do that. Like, I can write about us. why can't the artists write about themselves, right? So it's like the ethics of like the political ethics of like, as an artist being able to theorize for ourselves, right? Theorize our own music. Let me tell you what this is about. Let me tell you what it's like to be a singer, a woman singer, right? Let me tell you what it's like to be a Chicana on the stage, a Chicana in the grassroots or whatever. And so I'd read people like Anzaldúa, of course, and other people, all the artists that you know, and scholars that, you know, are featured here. But I decided that I could probably do that. And so I actually applied for a Fulbright to try to finish a music project independently. I applied as a Fulbright independently, and then I applied to grad school at the same time because I did have an academic that said, can you write a little bit about what you do on the tarima? And I was like, it's not folklorico, right? And I was like, no, it's not. It's like a mix kind of like with Afro-Cuban rhythms and blah, blah, blah. I kind of mix it up. She's like, that sounds amazing. Can you write about it? So I started writing.
Words.
Yeah.
We love words.
And she edited some of it, or she would send it back and tell me more about this, or can you say that? And then I ended up writing this piece that ended up getting published in a book. And then when I was done, she said, you know, you can take this and apply to grad school with this because they want a writing sample.
Wow.
And I was like, oh. And so I had a gig where I met this woman. Her name is Michelle Habel Payan, who taught at the University of Washington in Seattle. I met her at a gig because our kids started playing together. And I told her, she said, you were just singing right now, right? And I said, yeah. She's like, but this is not my band. I said, it's a quartet, but I sing for a band called Quetzal. She's like, I know Quetzal, I teach her music. And I was like, really? She's like, yeah. Oh my God. And then I mentioned that I wanted to go back to school. She's like, you need to come to the University of Washington. We have money. The UCs have no money.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
And so anyhow, after much deliberation and the package that I got, I applied to other grad schools. To UCLA, I got in there, but they had 1 year guarantee, which means that you're on your own the rest of the time. And I was like, nope. So I went to the University of Washington in Seattle for 6 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's amazing that it happened that way, where you met this woman and you know, put it all together.
Through music.
Yeah, through music.
So music has always been like, I feel like the Godfather when I say like, right when I leave it, like it pulls me back in. You know, it's true. Yeah. It's crazy, you know. But
so how was that experience being up there for 6 years? And
amazing.
Did your family move with you? Or?
Yeah, wow. Quetzal and Sandino. We felt very lonely the first 6 months. And we started, you know, teaching people the fandango practice, music, the canto, the playing. And before you knew it, we had a whole community of fandangueros up there. Now, one of the most prominent communities up there is like the Seattle Fandango Project. And that became a whole thing that it was somewhat sponsored by the Seattle, you know, from the university, from UW. And we have like a family up there now. They're amazing. We're going to go up in the fall again and just do some other things with them. And, you know, Sandino grew up there. He started going to school there. He loved it.
And it was cold.
It was very cold and gloomy, rainy. But we missed it a lot because there's a lot of, although we connected and have a beautiful family up there, Quetzal was always like, we're Angelinos. We're coming back home.
Need the sun. Yeah.
We're coming back home. And so we did.
Yeah. And so coming back home, then, la señora doctora, you know, how was that? And tell us a little bit about like some of the work that you're doing now. Yeah.
So I came back a year early before I graduated to write my dissertation here. I got a fellowship. Ford Fellowship that allowed me to come back home, and then Quetzal started work. I mean, he worked a lot up there as well, and then when he started working here, we lived here again, and I started applying for jobs at the same time. So it gave me time to also apply for jobs, and the following year I heard about Scripps College. It's a women's college here in Claremont. And I got the job. I couldn't believe it. It was around gender and popular culture. That was pretty much what I write about. And I was so excited, and it's been amazing. I've been 10 years. This fall will be 10 years. Wow. I'm tenured there, and I'm going to go up for full professorship probably later this year. And it's been really great. I feel very blessed that I enjoy what I do. Because when I was about to start teaching, I remember telling Quetzal, what if I don't like it? What if I hate it? What's going to happen if? And it's like, if you do, we'll figure it out. Don't worry about it. Just, just finish the dissertation. Just get it done, and I did. And I enjoy writing. I enjoy thinking shit up. I enjoy talking about it, I love music, and I have all of these different ways that I think about it, all the different ways that I play it, all the different ways that I engage in it, in community, on the stage, in writing, in teaching. Music is an amazing tool.
So tell us about your book that I didn't...
that you didn't read.
I completely forgot that you even had a book. So when you said that, I was like, oh my God. But
you know what? I'm going to bring you one. I'm going to bring you one. Yeah. And I apologize that
okay.
When I left, I was turning the corner. I was like, fuck, I forgot my book. But it's called Chicano Artivistas, Music, Community, and Transborder Tactics. Okay. And it's really about, it's about a lot of autoethnography. It's a lot about my life, right, in music. It's really about, and all the different stories throughout my life, some of which I've told today. And it's in that way, in that micro look, is about the change of music conception over time. So how my father raised us to think about music, and then how all of these different community moments and on the stage, but also in the trenches of social movement, how I think about music in a totally different way than how my father raised us to think about music, And so that's like the micro look at it. But the macro look, as you pull back, the whole thing is really a critique on capitalism. Wow. And how it has fundamentally altered how we think about our own creative selves, and how that has fundamentally altered how we relate to each other as community. It's
crazy how much capitalism controls just anything that you listen to anywhere, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, since...
And we can know it's there.
Music,
yeah, and we can know it's there and know how it works, and that it's important to know, right? And then, we can choose when to push against it, when to pull back, when to, which is what it means to be Chicano, right? In so many ways, how we survive, how we try shit and do this and do it that way. And no, we're not going to do that. No, I'm not going to sell out. No, I'm going to survive. I'm going to this, It's all the ways in which we can understand the systems around us, and how... number one, one of the things I talk a lot about in the book is that how capitalism is really a social force. It's not just economic. We think about it economically, but it's really a social force that is coming at us in all of these different ways, And sometimes we have to be able to rupture those moments of no, this is another world is possible. I can also survive this way. I can also think about music in these ways, and which is why I'm so, and we didn't talk about this, but the fandango, for example, or other techniques that we've used in music, like collective songwriting workshops in communities.
Oh yeah, I love those. I actually did one at one of the Saludartes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that for us was amazing, which we learned in Chiapas. We didn't talk about that part, but in Chiapas in 1997, those 5 days were transformative, because it was we learned, this is the first time I ever thought about music in another way than how my father taught it or was thinking about it his entire life.
Tell us a little bit about that, how the fandango is without a performer audience, how it's all just...
Yeah, a fandango is basically a fiesta. It's a participatory music and dance practice, native to the state of Veracruz, right? One of the most famous sones in the practice is La Bamba, for example, right? Everybody knows La Bamba. But there are so many sones, about 150 sones you could possibly hear in a fandango. And the thing about the fandango is that it's not there's music and there's dance, but it's not a performance. It's participatory. Everybody participates in some way or another, and it takes shape in almost like a circle. There's a wooden platform in the middle, which is kind of like the vortex of the fandango, which is the center, the heartbeat, where the rhythm happens, where the dancing happens, and everybody sort of circling around it, not moving, but surrounding it and playing. And there's there's a whole protocol. There's call and response. There's poetry. There is singing. People, and that generates a kind of community building, a community sort of connection that is beautiful. And the only place I've experienced that was in the early days of the music and all the bands collaborating, and it was very familiar. And again, the learning curve of the fandango is extensive. Like it's interesting because with 3 chords you can participate. 3 basic chords you can participate, but what you can stand to learn is like an ocean, like it's like as deep as the ocean. From the versos that you can memorize, once you get really good at memorizing versos, you know a shit ton. Then before you know it, then you learn how to write them on the spot, freestyle on the spot, or you can write them ahead of time and memorize them. And anyhow, it's just there's so much to learn in the practice. And the beautiful part is that people experience it like, oh wow, I can actually play with these people. And some people are really good, and some people are not so good. Yeah. Some people are out of tune. But it's
also fun to see that.
Exactly. Yeah. The ethics is what's beautiful. And a successful fandango is, as Quetzal sometimes says, like the depth of participation. Like how many people actually participate, how it feels. And then sometimes it sounds amazing, sometimes not so good. People are like, but the whole point is that the ethics is that everybody's trying and we're trying to make good sound together, and it's just fun. And you don't have to be perfect. Yeah. You don't have to be the master musician. Yeah. So long as you have a couple of people that kind of know what they're doing, everybody else hangs on to them, and then we're just like rolling, and it's just an amazing feeling that people used to play music like that. Yeah. We always did. Before performative cultures, we had these kinds of gatherings and jams.
I like that with the tiny little bit of instruction that I've done, like teaching little workshops and stuff. Just what you said right now, the depth of participation means so much.
Right.
When all the students are like listening and working, it is a whole different vibe than when, half of them are, playing with their phones or whatever. Just, depth of participation.
Yeah, how you see people, how connected they are. Even if some of them aren't playing, they're just kind of watching or whatever.
Yeah,
just
I would just do the call and response. I never got up on the boards or never try to do the rhymes. But it is a lot of fun, and it is beautiful, and the rhythms are just so much fun. So we're winding down to the last few minutes, and I always like to give the guests the opportunity to speak about anything that we haven't brought up yet. Is there anything else that you'd like to, maybe some parting words?
Yeah, I think that my at the end of my life, I think what I want more than anything else is to really reinstate the appetite for these kinds of spaces, reinstate the appetite for participatory creative practices in any which way they come, whether it's music, poetry, cooking, all the other arts that we have in our human cultures and in our Mexicano cultures and root cultures and our Chicano cultures, all of the things that we have that are about bringing people together and letting them be creative together. I think that's my goal as a human being, as an artist, as a mom, to show my son all the different ways that life can be beautiful through art, music, and culture.
I love that. That's beautiful. There's a question that we ask everybody at the end of each episode, and it's a very vague question. So feel free to answer vaguely if you want to. Marta Gonzalez, how do you do it?
I do one thing at a time.
One thing at a time.
I think as a woman of color, and a professional and a singer and a mom, I wear all these different hats. And sometimes I've been asked, like, how do you do it all, Which I love the way you pose it, though. It's really cool. And I say, do you think we could do it all? And I say, yes, but not all at the same time.
Yeah.
As a mom, I had to give up some things, I was left out of some things, And I gave everything I have to being a mom for many years. And then I still do. Sometimes I drop shit and that I really want to do, but because my son needs me, you know, I'm there. And other times my son doesn't get as much attention because I'm busy trying to finish my dissertation, or I'm trying to, you know, finish recording this album and writing these lyrics or whatever it is, you know. Or so there's a picture somewhere where he's nursing and I'm singing backgrounds in a mic, you know, in a recording studio, you know, and things like that, you know, like we can do it all, and I've experienced so many things. I feel so grateful, but I just know that everything I've done hasn't all been at once. One thing
not
at
everything
a time.
everywhere all at once.
Yeah, not everything everywhere all at once. Exactly. Sometimes you have to choose.
Well, for this moment and for this experience right here, I thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time so much. And
I love your show. Thank you.
Appreciate it. And we'll see you guys next week.